Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Just a reminder that everyone turn off or silence your cell phones or electronic devices. This is a hearing for the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Thorold for Thursday, August 15th, 2024. Everyone present will be given an opportunity to speak for or against the applications being heard. When given a chance to speak, you will have only 5 minutes, so please make sure to be as clear and consistent as possible. For your information, Committee of Adjustment is a public process. Personal information such as the applicant's name and property address, which is reported at a Committee of Adjustment meeting, is public information. Minutes of this Committee of Adjustment meeting will be received by Thorold City Council at a public council meeting and become part of the public record. Please address your comments and questions through the chair. A copy of the decision will be sent to the applicant or agent or to any person who files a written request. Agencies commenting on applications may request that certain conditions be imposed. Voicing objections to these conditions will not adversely affect the committee's decision. The Committee of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial body operating under the Planning Act, the Municipal Act, and the Statutory Powers Procedure Act, as well as various provincial regulations. Sections 45 and 50 of the Planning Act outline the circumstances surrounding the approval of minor variances and controlling the conveyance of land in Ontario and the prevention of subdivision of land except with governmental approval. The applicant, the minister, or any specified person or public body who has an interest in the matter may, within 20 days of the making of a minor variance decision and 20 days from the date of a making of a consent decision, appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Please note, neighbors and other interested parties not defined by the Planning Act are no longer eligible to file appeals as per Bill 23, More Homes Built Faster Act 2022. I ask the Deputy Clerk to read the land acknowledgement at this time, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the City of Thorold is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The City of Thorold stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands in which we live.
Thank you. Does any member of this panel have a pecuniary interest in any of the applications to be considered at this meeting? Nor do I. May I have a motion from the committee that the agenda be adopted as presented? Mr. Ravenek, seconded by Mr. Pizzo. All in favor? Thank you. I have a motion that the minutes of July 18th, 2024 be adopted. Mr. Pizzo, seconded by Mr. Jackson. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. Was notice given as required by the Planning Act, Madam Secretary?
Yes, sir, it was.
Any requests for withdrawal or adjournment?
No requests for withdrawal or adjournment, but I would like to advise that staff pulled the consent application D 1013 2024 regarding 20 Regent Street, as required documentation was not submitted in time for this hearing.
So noted. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The first application, 18 Welland Street South. Mr. Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The site is located on the east side of Welland Street South and west of Chapel Street South, and there are two minor variances that are being requested. This is for the construction of an accessory structure. So the first minor variance is to allow for a maximum lot coverage of 16%, whereas the bylaw permits 10%. And the second variance is to allow a maximum gross floor area of a secondary dwelling unit of 45%, whereas the bylaw requires up to 40, or permits up to 40. The application was circulated, comments were received. There were no comments received from the public on this application. Staff is of the opinion that it does meet the 4 tests for a minor variance and are supportive of the application, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Who presents this case? Would you approach, please, and identify yourself? Is the microphone on, sir? Green button right in the middle.
Oh, there it is.
There. Now we can hear you.
There you go. Michael
Excellent.
White.
Welcome. Do you have anything to add to the?
No, yeah, we did the drawings according to certain numbers that we had, and then found out that our numbers were incorrect. So then the drawing was done, so then it was probably just easier for us to ask for the variance for the size that we asked for, instead of making it smaller. We're trying to make it the same size as the apartment above, so at least there was some consistency. So that's why we asked for the variance to make it a little bit bigger.
Thank you, Mr. White. Questions or comments from the committee members? Mr. Ravenak?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Sorry. Thanks, Glenn. Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. White, one of the neighbors had voiced a concern about flooding. You've probably seen that that letter that was received by the city.
Yes.
Could you just comment on that?
Yeah, I'm not too sure what he was talking about, because we're going to be on grade, and there's never been any sign of any problem with water in the backyard. So I have no idea what they're concerned about, like why it would change.
Okay, thank you.
Was there a report from the city?
I never got anything. I never heard. Yeah, no, I never heard of anybody asking for anything.
This is regarding the letter we received yesterday, I'm assuming?
No, this one was received in our package.
Oh, in the pack, okay, thank you. Mr. Davidson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would note that the engineering division didn't note any issues. The overall grading would be looked at through the building permit process. So if there were any issues, it would be resolved so that the post-development flows would meet the pre-development flows. So there shouldn't be any impacts on the adjacent neighbors.
Mr. Jackson?
Through the chair, the parking pad that you have in front with an existing duplex there with one additional building in the rear, I'm assuming there's going to be 3 cars using that pad.
Yeah, we overdid the pad from the beginning, just because it was the way that the existing driveway was done and what we added to it. So when they came to pour the asphalt, it was like we might as well go here because it was all stone anyway.
Okay.
So they made it bigger than the original plan, which was enough for 2 cars.
Okay.
But the way it was done, it was actually meant for 3.
Okay.
Yeah. That was actually the first step in our application, was to say, if we've got room for 3, can we do the ADU? And that was the first approval we got. So
Okay. Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Pizzo?
Application 13/21/24, based on the pertinent information and comments presented at this.
Okay, thank you. We have a seconder. I'm sorry, Mr. Pizzo, did you have something else? No. No, okay. Mr. Jackson, did you second? Further questions or comments? All in favor of the motion? Thank you. Thank you. Good luck. Mr. Davidson, 11 Front Street South, D1322-2024.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the site is located on the west side of Front Street South, east of Towpath Street, south of Albert Street West, and north of Sullivan Avenue. So the site is currently has an existing commercial structure and with 2 residentials above it. The proposal is for a 2-story structure to be erected to the rear of the existing building. It will be separate from the existing building. And in order to do this, the applicants are requesting a relief from the parking regulations to require 3 parking spaces, whereas 17 spaces are required. So the use is looking to accommodate additional housing in our downtown area. The units are to be bachelor apartments, so there are not going to be a large number of people. Staff does note that we have an existing municipal parking lot situated just to the west of the property. And under Bill 23, Building Houses Quicker Act, there is a requirement to intensify development in the downtown area. What I would say is an application like this is not precedent setting either. it is a situation where we look at every application on a case-by-case basis. So it does seem like a large request for the variance, but staff is supportive of the application because we do believe there is adjacent parking around there. And in addition, the type of residence that would be in that apartment structure may not require as much vehicle use, and there is public transit obviously out by this site as well. So staff is satisfied that it meets the 4 tests of the minor variance and are here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Who presents on behalf of this application, please? Approach, identify yourself, please.
Good morning, Chair and fellow members of the committee. My name is Cam Lang. I'm a planner with Lally Homes, and John Lally, the owner, is in attendance, raising his hand in behind me as well. Angela, could you please put up, or how do I access the presentation? Oh, it's over here. So I'll just tell you next slide then, and you can move on accordingly. Okay, perfect. Next slide, please. So as Mr. Davidson pointed out, by the way, we obviously agree with staff's recommendation. I'll say that right off the top. We're here because the bylaw requires 1.5 spaces per unit, and we simply cannot accommodate 17 parking spaces on site. So we have provided 3. Next slide, please. Property location, obviously, is downtown Thorold, it's just south of the Front Albert intersection. This is within an intensification corridor and within 2 community improvement areas. As Mr. Davidson points out, and within the staff report, intensification corridors and areas are afforded the highest priority for densification and the accommodation of additional housing. Next slide, please. In terms of the site characteristics, I have a red cat toy here, Dot, that I use to point out things on the slide, so I'll be using that throughout. Mr. Lally has purchased the 11 Front Street South, and not only has he maintained the existing heritage building known as the Stone Store, but he's actually improved the appearance of it in the short tenure that he's owned it. In behind is where we're proposing the building. It's going to be actually 3 stories, but half of the it's going to be below grade, so it will essentially look like a 2.5-story building. It's hidden from the Main Street corridor. It won't diminish the significance of the Heritage storefront at all. It won't be visible from Front Street. And that's not to say this won't be an attractive building either. It will be, and it'll be very sympathetic to the Stone Store. It will also be using gray stone within the architecture itself. There is a 10-foot right-of-way in between the 11 Front Street South and the adjacent building. This is the PharmaSave, Henderson's PharmaSave. This will be maintained. It's an important alleyway. It is the only place where you can access Front Street from the residential parking lots to the west. And it's been in existence since the mid-1800s when the Welland Canal used to be located in behind here. Next slide, please. The proposed site plan, there will be a bit of a separation between the existing store and the new building, about 5 feet of separation. There are going to be 2 common entrance points to access the building. There will be 1 unit there, 1 unit in the middle, and 1 unit on the right. For a total of 3 stories, gives you 9 units. the servicing will come from Eakins Lane. There is adequate services there, both water and sanitary, and that has been confirmed through a functional servicing report. Yeah, the front of the building will be oriented towards this laneway, so it will improve the attractiveness within the Eakins Lane streetscape and along in terms of the connection to the main street on Front Street. Next slide, please. This is the proposed building elevation. Here, as you can see, the use of gray stone. Half of the first story will be below grade, so in terms of height, above grade, it'll be about 25, 26 feet. The units are proposed to be only just over 500 square feet, which is, some of you may have living rooms that might rival that size. So that gives you some context for the types of tenants that will be living here. There are no bedrooms. So there's essentially, you walk in the door and there's a Murphy bed on the right that flips up and down. It's really only 2 rooms, a main room with the kitchen off the main living room, and then a washroom facility as well. So it's very unlikely that future tenants will own a vehicle, simply put. Rents will be a few $100s below average market rent for our apartments within the Niagara region, and this will fit an affordability need that is so needed within not just Thorold, but the province as a whole. Next slide. So the point of this slide is to merely point out that you can live in downtown Thorold and not own a vehicle at all. I couldn't honestly think of anything that isn't provided within downtown Thorold itself. All of the essential services in terms of financial to medical, dental, post office, pharmacies, schools, parks are provided within this area. Generally, we use a 400-meter radius as a tipping point between when people will choose to walk and when they won't. There's a grocery store within 280 meters of the site. And basically all daily and weekly shopping needs can be met on foot. Next slide. And for those who wish to perhaps use the university, there is direct access. The Thorold Towpath Terminal is a 30-second walk from the subject property. Daily service to Brock University as well as the Penn Center, our regional shopping area, 6:30 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. every half hour, and then there's also weekend service as well. So if somebody needed to go to the Penn Center or to do higher end shopping, they have that capability. And of course, any student who may be renting won't need a car because they can get to university every half hour by transit. Next slide. In terms of nearby parking, this is the biggest reason why I don't, in my opinion, believe that we need to provide any parking at all on site. Not only will residents not likely own a vehicle, but if they do, and if they wanted to live in this apartment building, they have the ability to pay $50 per month for a monthly parking permit. There are four parking lots in behind. The subject property is right here, the blue dot. There is a monthly permit lot over here, the Sullivan and Towpath Municipal Lot, and I'll show details in the upcoming slides about how sparse these lots are used. There's the monthly the hourly lot, the old Fire Hall Municipal Lot, right in behind the subject property. It's 2 hours of free parking and then $1 thereafter. And then over here to the north is the JC Centennial Park Municipal Lot, where you won't find any spaces at any time being occupied. And then the only one that really is utilized is, of course, the Albert Street lot, which provides free parking all day. And it's likely that those are filled up by employees living downtown, or working downtown. Next slide, please. This provides a close-up, Google Earth close-up, and then this is a picture of that I took personally. As you can see, there's ample space throughout this monthly permit lot. Next slide. This is the Fire Hall Municipal Lot across, just across the street. Again, ample parking provided here. Now, if a tenant did own a property, or if a tenant did lease within this building, it's unlikely they would be using that. They would get a monthly permit in one of the lots that exists. There's two of them. The next slide, please. This is the lot that has, I've never seen a vehicle in it. This is the JC Centennial Park lot. It accommodates 54 spaces, and it is not utilized at all. Next slide. And this is the only one that is utilized, the Albert Street lot, and even then, you can see that there's space, that there's still some spaces that can be utilized there. But again, it's not likely that a tenant will be utilizing, or depending on free parking, they'll want assurances that they could park if they did own a vehicle. Next. And this merely provides the other three municipal free parking lots that are on the northern edge of downtown. And if this, again, is probably utilized by employees working in the downtown. 7-minute walk to the farthest one, 3-minute walk to the Front Street one, and then the arena lot also has free parking. Next. And just in terms of summarizing, this proposal is consistent with the provincial growth plan, the regional plan, and the city official plan in terms of promoting or higher density housing within intensification areas and corridors. It is consistent with the surrounding built form of the area. It will contribute to a healthier, more complete and vibrant downtown. It will help support existing businesses. This is exactly what the downtown needs in terms of attracting more commerce. You get more people downtown, you get more business downtown. The main point I want to make, though, is that there is an excess of free parking within the downtown, paid hourly parking, and especially monthly permit parking, which is where residents will park if they do own a vehicle. They will not stress adjacent properties. They will not be competing with parking in terms of where employees park or other residents park. They will be utilizing monthly permits. And as you could see from those slides, they aren't, those permit lots are underutilized. So I think that summarizes my presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the committee members? Mr. Pizzo.
Just a reminder to use those microphones through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Parking downtown was exempt. When was it changed? It was exempt from Ormond Street all the way, Front Street over to Ormond Street.
Through Mr. Chair, I'm not sure when the change actually happened. As far as I could see, there was still requirements under the 97 bylaw, so it may have changed, sometime before that.
When did it change?
Again,
Well, how do we make a decision? 11 Front Street is 11 Front Street, and the parking was exempt at one time. Are you sure it's changed?
through Mr. Chair, we are sure that it's changed, that it does require the parking, and that's why they've made the application.
What about the medical building there? They're exempt?
Through Mr. Chair, everyone is actually subject to parking regulations. They just, sometimes they would ask for relief from parking regulations, as in this case. I think what I can say is I know the city is undertaking a parking study for the entire city of Thorold, so that it may change in the future, but as today's standards, they are required to get relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw for the parking spaces, or I guess the discrepancy from 17 going down to 3.
So parking in lieu of no is in, eh? For a long time, it was no, yes, no, yes. And so if you live on Pine Street, you can buy a lot on, the lot on Albert Street.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman,
Well-
I'm just trying to,
Parking in lieu of is across town now. If you live in St. Sullivan Avenue, can you at least get a spot downtown?
through Mr. Chair, they would need to provide the parking spaces for the building that they're building. So if they were building a single detached building, they'd be required to provide 1.5 or 2 parking spaces
No,
for
you're not
that
answering my
space.
question. My question is, if I live on Carlton Street, okay, and I want to do a renovation and there's not enough room for parking, can I rent in lieu of a parking spot on Albert Street?
Through Mr. Chair, you would have to come to this committee or to council to get relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw if you don't meet the provisions of the zoning bylaw. So if you're required to provide 3 parking spaces, you need to provide 3. If you can't, you would need to come either to this committee or go to council to get relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw.
So if you're giving it here, the opportunity is good that you can get it if you lived on Sullivan Avenue.
Through Mr. Chair, I would say we would look at everything on a case-by-case basis. That's the best I can offer in this situation. In this situation, we look at all of the surrounding parking opportunities that exist. We look at the type of housing that's being provided, and we look at, what would the impact be. In this case, you have a rental situation where people would be renting on the understanding that they would have to find parking in the downtown area. So, like I say, I think Mr. Lang has kind of covered off the situation where there is a surplus of parking spaces in the downtown area. We're just looking at it saying we agree with that concept, we agree with that idea. It is an area for intensification, so we're supportive of this idea. But going forward, it doesn't presuppose what we're going to say on other applications. Everything is kind of circumstantial, and it depends on the application.
So you don't know what year it was changed?
I don't know what year it was changed. And it, through Mr. Chairman, I mean, it could change in the future too. I mean, we are undertaking the review of all of our planning documents, so it could change in the future as well.
Well, doesn't satisfy me.
Further questions or comments? Mr. DiPaolo.
Through you, Chair, I think the presentation's pretty good. However, I went and visited the site, and I got a different feeling. And can the developer already comment on why there's already 2 holes dug on the site? That would be my first question, and then I'll get to my follow-up questions.
Yeah, we can answer that. We're in the, so that requirement is, came from the region. You're required to get a record of site condition filed on the ministry's website whenever you're changing a use from whether it's commercial to a more sensitive land use. In this case, it's residential. The reason there's 2 holes there is because the owner, Mr. Lally, has been doing test pits, and as you may know, this whole area was subject to a former, essentially a rail corridor, as well as the old Welland Canal. There's a lot of contamination within this particular area, and essentially it's cleaning it up. It's a good thing. So there is a process that needs to be taken to do that, and Mr. Lally is working towards acquiring that record of site condition in order to get a building permit. So we are unable to get a building permit issued until an RSC is filed on the environmental registry. So that's why you see the 2 holes. And there will probably be additional testing, from what I understand as well, and cleanup.
Yeah, and just so you guys know, they're not just holes; they're large. You can fit cars in these things, like they're large.
Oh, yeah.
So I was just curious, and I knew that there was something going on. So I saw that they were well fenced off. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and they are cordoned off.
Yes, and through you, Chair.
Yeah.
The parking. It's an interesting site. Like when you're there, and I was there, and you're going to put 9 units in here, and I talked to actually a couple of the business owners on Front Street about it. There was no objection from them, you know, you put more people here again, but you've already kind of identified the template of the tenant who's going to potentially occupy these places, and they were, you know, they were probably, they were, you know, where's everybody gonna park was the one question I heard from some of the people on Front Street. And so your presentation with respect to all this excess parking that's there today is interesting. My concern is for people who are disabled or handicapped or require access to buildings. I really have a desire to understand anybody that might require, you know, a different size vehicle. Where are they going to be able to put? Where's somebody who doesn't have the mobility that requires a different vehicle? Where are they going to park here? And how are they going to move around? Because what I can tell you, it's a tight spot. And my only so I do have a concern around people with mobility issues getting proper. Somebody who has a mobility issue parking, even though you might think it's not that far, it's far. So I have a real concern with people who have mobility issues around us, limiting the number of parking spots. So if you can comment on that.
Yeah,
through
so
you, Mr.
I
Chair.
think there's the way we can structure, and if John wants to talk about that, certainly there's probably a way we can structure.
So Peter, that's a great question. And just so you know, my background is actually retirement home living. I took hotels and I've converted them to retirement homes. One in Niagara Falls that was 112 units. So we've already designed every one of these rooms, as Cam pointed out. They're open. They're bigger than my retirement home suites in Niagara Falls. And they all have handicap washrooms. So all 9 have handicap washrooms set in. There is some things like you mentioned. So there is a lot of people who would have handicap, would have access to the downtown is a good thing because they have access to handicap busing, they have access to handicap transit. For your point, if they have their own car, yes, it's not as close as a driveway or anything like that, but we have designed every unit, all 9, that could fit to certain, and handicap isn't just walking, there's eyes and hearing, and all our rooms have access to lower light switches, lower countertops, and every bathroom has grab bars. It has no lip going in. It all has the 5-foot radius circle that's required under the handicap. So most buildings are required to have about 30%. We did all 100% units with accessibility.
Through you, Mr. Chair, would you commit to? Could we put something in that? One of the 3 spaces is clearly marked for accessible parking?
We can do that.
I think that'd be very fair, yes.
If not, could we, is that possible? Like, could we put that in there?
I'm fine with that if Mark and the city, I'm sure, they may make, usually when you see, they want a handicap spot very close to the door, so I'm sure, but for, you know, our development, Lally Developments, we have no issue with that at all.
Mr. Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just say that the site is actually going to be subject to site plan control, and we can take that direction that one of the spaces be accessible.
Yeah, and I know that when we do these, when we, you know, at this committee, when we put on these conditions, it becomes this might be a condition that I know we don't typically like, but it might be not a massive weight of a condition if we could, and I don't know if I want to put the motion forward with a condition, so I'm just having a discussion about it, whether I would need to do that, or could we really make sure, like, I think it's important that we recognize the fact that there are people, and, you know, when I look around in this room, all of us are getting older, that one day we
now,
might
just a
need,
second.
we might need accessibility ourselves. Like, it's important that, you know, when I look at a building today, one of the things I look at is, can we make it accessible? So even the doors, and, you know, congratulations on making the rooms really accessible. Are the doors accessible? Could they be automatic doors? Those kind of things. Because you're asking for, I think, a substantial, I would say a substantial adjustment here, giving. And it, you know, we're trying to accommodate and make sense in every, you know, within the new legislation and everything. But there's also things that I think that we want to bring up and making sure that we cover off. So would that all, like, do I need to put a condition on that? I'm kind of asking here. No.
I wouldn't.
Well, okay.
Simply because reality that strikes me first is people with mobility issues, are they gonna move into a non-elevator building?
Well, and again, it doesn't
Ground
mean that they're in a
floor,
chair,
perhaps?
but it just means that they're walking. Like I know from personal things, like somebody, you can be fully functional and just have one leg. And you don't need it, you can walk around and get around, but it's easier to slip and fall when the weather's bad and you're walking to your place, and it's harder to open the door when you're carrying groceries and that kind of thing, right? So that's kind of what I'm getting at, and that. So I don't need to put a condition on, right, gentlemen? Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
We can certainly, one of the 3 spaces, we have an ample width to make one of them handicap accessible, so we can do that, certainly.
Mr. Pizzo?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think the record, we could rely on some goodwill, and I don't dispute your concern. I do share it, and that's why I bring it up here today, to talk a little bit about it. But
Mr. Davidson could certainly ensure that that's included within the development agreement, which will be.
Site plan?
Site plan agreement, that
which
could
we'll
be
signing,
perfect. Okay.
Executing anyway.
That would be,
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, through Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Lang's correct. I mean, it is going to require to go through an extra Planning Act approval for site plan.
Okay.
We've heard the direction of committee. We've heard the willingness of the applicants. So I think the idea of a condition attached to the minor variance, it makes it a little messier.
okay. One last question from my part then, in terms of, again, just walking the site and going through there, who would, through you, Mr. Early, who would be responsible for the maintenance of the property, the snow clearing, all that kind of stuff? Because that lane, like that laneway there, is that city property? So is it a city plow that's gonna go through there? Or, because it's not, that 10-foot corridor you talked about, so I just was wondering.
The city does run their sidewalk snow plow down the corridor to the laneway, but I've, owning a retirement home, I'm very familiar with having our logbooks for snow removal, logbooks for salting. So that would fall on me, which I've always done a good job. I think people come by and see our building, they always see. I think Front Street in general now is spectacular and has spectacular businesses, and everybody's working hard to keep it clean. So snow removal and salting falls on me, on my part, but the city even does take their sidewalk machine and go down that laneway, and I gotta give the city a lot of credit. They're there early after every snowfall and people walk through there. And now it will be much better lit with the building. It's actually, I think, going to kind of give it a good vibe.
And through you, Mr. Chair, my last comment is, when we consider the word intensification, we should supply this to the province, because this is intense, putting a building back there, a 9-unit.
I agree. Further questions or comments? Mr. Pizzo? Feel free to make a motion.
So, through you, Mr. Chair,
Who's talking? Mr. DeBono.
what I would suggest is that if there's going to be a desire to bring an amended motion, the initial motion that is set out in the report is put on the floor with a mover and seconder, and then there can be an amended motion, and there can be a separate vote on that. So I can put the original motion on the screen.
No one's made that motion.
That's correct. But if there's going to be an amended motion, we have to know what the initial.
I think we're getting ahead of
motion
ourselves
is.
a little bit. Mr. Ravenek, you've got your hand up. No. Mr. Ravenek?
Before I make the motion, just a question to Mr. Davidson. Under the Ontario Disabilities Act, isn't there a requirement for handicap parking in, like, at most commercial type buildings or apartment buildings? Like most apartment buildings you go to these days, have a designated parking spots for disabled persons.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's correct. Typically, under a lot of zoning bylaws, if you were a required parking, the first parking space is typically an accessible space. So in this case, I think it's redundant to make that addition to the motion for the accessible space. Again, it goes through another Planning Act application, and I don't believe it's necessary. If committee did want to include it, we would need to include a time frame on it as well, because we don't have lapsing times for our minor variances. So that would need to be, again, maybe a 2-year period if committee wished to go that route. But again, I'll leave that in the hands of committee.
Okay, if that's the case, I'll make a motion that the application,
Just a second. We can put a motion on the floor, then I'll come back to you,
oh,
Karen.
sorry,
No, go ahead.
that D10-14-2024 be approved based on review of the pertinent information, the comments presented at this hearing, and having conducted a site visit, and for the reasons stated in the planning report.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Mr. Pizzo? Yes? We are. We're going to put a motion on the floor first, and then I'm going to members, and then I'll go to the floor. You're welcome. Mr. Daniels?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. My comment, there's questions just regarding garbage. Where are the bins located? Where's the existing bins that are already at 11 Front Street located, and will they be moved? And where will the bins for the 9+ units be located?
Yeah, the architect set up and through the site plan, we did fire testing, garbage. There's bins now currently at the back right on Eakins Lane so they'll just continue to be in the same spot.
So they're going to be between the two buildings?
No, from the back of the new building to Eakins Lane.
So there's
Garbage pickup on both sides, the front of street and Eakins Lane.
okay, just the additional units. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels.
Yep.
Further questions or comments from the committee members? Seeing none. Madam, please approach. If you could identify yourself.
Yes, hi, I'm Gloria Leahy. Hello, Mr. Lally.
To the microphone.
My name's Gloria Leahy. I can't.
That's okay, you're doing fine.
I am a property business owner, very close to Mr. Lally's proposed property and existing property, and welcome to the area. I don't want to say I'm against development. I'm not. But I do have a few points to make because my property is so close to this one. First of all, that the residents will be required to purchase a parking permit. So they are required as tenants if they have a car.
I think that's been answered, I think.
I just want to make 100% sure.
So for example, I live above the store on Front Street, so I already purchased for $50 just to the right of the fire hall. And we purchased 3, and when we talked to the city, they said there's many permits available. So if somebody does have a vehicle, if they do, like me, they'll pay $50 a month and park to the right of the fire hall.
But as my question is, as a condition of being a tenant, as part of the lease, are they required?
Yes. At least they'll have to park where I park currently, to there, and we've already talked to the city, there's plenty of permits available, and they'll be required to pay the $50 per month and park the car there.
Okay. All right, that's very good. I'm happy to hear that. Although they are required, I still do have some concerns because I have properties on, there's Aikens Lane, and then there's the alleyway of Aikens Lane, if you're familiar with that. And there's lots of people try to park for free. I understand there's a lot of parking available, but everybody wants a free parking spot. Am I too close? So I'm very concerned about my tenants, and there's a right-of-way on that laneway, which is blocked sometimes. And there's a lot going on in that little alleyway. Part of it is City of Thorold land. To that point, Councillor De Paula brought up, accessibility and people walking. Every year there's a major pothole at the juncture of Aikens Lane and Aikens Alley, let's call it. It has a few names, Aikens Place, sometimes it's called Albert. Usually it's called Aikens Lane as well. It's a big pothole, and it freezes up. It's pretty scary. So if there are people who are walking there regularly, which I assume there will be with all those tenants, something needs to be done about that pothole, because it keeps coming back. I'm just letting the city know about that. And to echo Councillor Paola's concerns that, is it really a minor variance? I mean, this is quite a reduction in parking spaces, and I'm worried that it's a bit of a slippery slope for future developments. Again, I'm not against development. I don't even own a car myself. I ride my bike everywhere, but my property has the required plus amount of parking, and I don't know why should some people have to follow the rules and others not? Again, I understand minor variances, but I don't know if this can be considered minor. I do have a question about one of the comments from the package. Hydro One asks about a registered easement. Otherwise, there might be a landlocked supply point on Aikens Lane. I don't quite understand that. If anyone could speak to that.
Mr. Davidson.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just reading the Hydro One comments. Originally, the intent was actually to create a separate parcel on the rear. That was how the application was circulated. So when Hydro One made their comments, that was going to be a severed parcel. So they were concerned with their supply going out to that part. The application does not include a severance. It's just for the minor variance. So in this case, the hydro corridor and the easement that runs through there will be intact. So we just didn't get a modified comment from Hydro One basically saying that they were not concerned. But they said if there was no severance, their comments were that they had no comment. We just did not receive a revised formal comment from Hydro on that front.
Thank you.
Okay. And lastly, about garbage, I'm concerned about it as well because there's a lot of garbage back there. There will be lots of new tenants, and I learned that now there's a restriction on large item pickup to twice a year. Is that correct?
That's a regional issue. I don't know.
Okay, because it used to be you could call as often as you liked, and now it has been reduced.
Mr. Chairman, half of these don't even belong.
No.
Nothing to do with the committee of adjustment meeting today.
Yep.
They should go to City Hall with a bylaw officer and talk it over with him.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, for your concerns.
All right. I disagree that they have no bearing on this. I mean, garbage and sinkholes and so on. They're around that property and around my property, and I'm bringing these concerns to the council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, I have a question.
Mr. Pizzo.
I'd like to ask, is it John?
The developer you're talking to?
Yeah. John, did you say you bought a $50 permit? Yes, I pay every
Through you, Mr. Chair, just no one can hear anything unless they're in the room. So please, if you can use the mics, that'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
Every month I pay $50 auto debit out of my bank account for a parking spot, and we do three. We have three for there's another gentleman that lives in the back part. So there's, through the city, we made sure there was adequate parking, and as we reassured Gloria, there's adequate parking there. There's lots of permits to be had, and the money goes to the city every month. So I kind of feel it's a bit of a win-win.
Okay, my question, Mr. Chairman, is can anybody buy a pass? And are you saying, Mr. Davison?
Through you, Mr.
If
Chairman,
somebody lives on Pine Street, they can go down and buy a $50 pass?
that's correct.
Thank you. Sir, if you could identify yourself?
Yes, my name is Gary Oblinski. I was previously an owner of the Batten Block on Front Street. That's the north side of Front Street. I was owner for almost 35 years, and parking was always an issue. Parking in terms of people parking behind that weren't authorized. I don't see that changing in terms of how people can be parked there and not be enforced. That's number one. Number two is the fact that you mentioned that parking permits are available, but there is nothing in any type of city legislation that forces the tenants to purchase a parking permit. If they don't want to, they don't have to. But he has indicated that it's going to be in the lease, but you have no authority to even demand that in a lease. Am I not understanding that correctly?
Go ahead.
Through Mr. Chairman, what I would say is in terms of enforcement, that is obviously a municipal requirement. We would be enforcing parking and ensuring that people have their monthly passes. If people do need parking space, they would have to pay the $50 a month to do so. So those parking passes are available through the municipality, through the city. But in terms of people that are parking there, it would just be regular enforcement through the municipal bylaw enforcement.
Are you going to enforce parking on the property itself?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the question is would we enforce on the site?
On the private property, yes.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, no, we would not. That would be if there are people that are parking on this site that are not part of this building, that would be on the residents to call bylaw enforcement to say that there are people parking there.
The next thing is snow removal and whatnot. I had a laneway adjacent to my property, and I was told that the city didn't have a proper deed to half the lot or half the laneway. It was lost and somehow shuffled, and it was an empty permit or an empty deed for half the lot. They only owned half the lot for the laneway. Am I assured that the city owns the laneway by having a deed?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
So they have a deed for that laneway. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Seeing none? All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Abstaining? There's two votes over here that I didn't see.
Sorry, can you call that again? I was looking at the paper.
What's that? Would you like to repeat your motion?
Did you call for a vote on the motion? Sorry.
I did, yes.
All in favor? Is that what
That's what I said. Hey, there you go. Thank you.
I didn't realize they voted. I was looking down.
I think I lost half my audience there. Eddie. All right. Thank you. That's it for this application, I believe. Moving on. 26 Renfrew Drive. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Davidson, you're still with us, right?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Go ahead.
Wait for a sec. So the subject plans are located on the south side of St. David's Road, east of Tupper Drive, west of Collier Road North, and north of Renfrew Drive. What we're looking at today is the severance of the rear parcel or portion of this parcel that fronts on St. David's Road. So the intent is to create 2 new residential lots, parts 2 and 3 on the plan, for the purposes of residential development. Staff have reviewed the application, and we have attached 2 sets of conditions for the 2 different applications. Staff is supportive of the applications and have recommended approval and are here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Who presents? Identify yourself, sir.
Tim Kenny, 14 McCartney Court, Thorold, Ontario. I'm here presenting on behalf of Mrs. Ciuffatelli.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Go ahead.
I've reviewed the recommendations of staff, and we agree to all the recommendations. I don't think there's any surprises there. I think this this proposal meets all of the provincial, regional, and local official plans, zoning bylaws. This is exactly the type of thing the province is pushing. If anything, probably there should be more density there than 2 single lots, but that's a debate for another day. I think included in your package is a planning justification report. The planning justification report was done by Mrs. Adele Arbor, who some of you will remember as the former Director of Planning for the City of Thorold. Now in her retirement, she's doing a bit of consulting, so I think she probably has a better history of this property than most people. It's been going on for 5 years. We originally came in and filed an application 5 years ago, but you know that the R1 component of the city zoning bylaw was appealed, the new R1, and it took 5 years to resolve. So Mrs. Ciuffatelli has been waiting 5 years. The neighbor next door to the left, where if you visited the lot, you'll see a brand new house there. That house was built on the Passrose lot, who went a different route, came in and asked for a rezoning and went ahead and built it. So as a bit of a history, I think that this is a good infill. It creates 2 lots. There are no minor variances requested. Both lots meet the minimum requirements and lot area, frontage of the new zoning bylaw. I did see there was one letter in that I was forwarded to yesterday, and there's some points that they bring up within the letter. I think, however, if someone carefully read the planning justification report and carefully read all of the comments from the region, from the city staff, I think that most of those questions have been addressed through the planning reports. There is a concern about the bus pull-off there, and that is addressed. We will have to go to the region and get a permit, an entrance permit, which will be suitable to them, which will take into account the bus pull-off there. There will have to be an easement. So these things are all have been discussed and addressed prior to bringing the application forward. We agreed to them as part of the recommendations. It's in the planning justification report. And so therefore, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to conclude that We concur with the recommendations of staff. I think it's a good infill. They have their road widening along there already, so that was one other thing I wanted to mention. That was done at the time they purchased the lot from the city of Thorold. I present that, and if there are any questions, I'd be more than willing to try to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Questions or comments for Mr. Kenny? Mr. Pizzo.
Mr. Chairman, this has been going on for 5 years, and I'd like to make a motion, put it on the floor, if somebody wants to second it, that 10, 14, 24, and 10, 15, 24 be approved, and I have to comment on the planning department did a great job on, are you listening, Mr. Dark? They did a
Mr.
great job
Chairman
on
is listening to you intently.
listening to me.
We
like
may
to
want to
have-
do
I'd
them
have-
separately.
I'm
That's-
sorry?
We may want to do them separately.
Well, I'll make a motion for two of them. I also like to tell Mr. Kenny, he's a chairman, not the mayor.
You were looking in the mirror, weren't you? Oh. So we'll do those separately, D14 and 15. You're making a motion for both.
Yeah.
Does somebody want to second both of them? Mr. Jackson. Okay. Can we hear from the public? Are there anybody here from the public? You look familiar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Gary Oblinski, and I live at 196 St. David's Road in St. Catharines, Ontario. I have concerns on the runoff and whatnot, and the planner has assured me that they will consider that in terms of what was going on. I didn't have a copy of this when I made my notes and whatnot, but I did read the reports from the city and the region in terms of the planning department, and there's a conflict between the planning department in Thorold and the region. It concerns, let me see here, separate entrances. The city requires separate entrances for both properties, and the region is insisting that they be combined to have a shared entranceway for the properties. That's a conflict in terms of the planning, and it has to do with the bus stop in front of the property, or one of the properties, or almost two of the properties, in terms of how is the bus and the people going to get off and on, and the shelter. And it causes a problem for parking on the property because it's very, very dangerous. I lived on St. David's Road across the street, and I've had 3 accidents in terms of people hitting me while I was backing out of the property. So I don't think there's going to be any difference in that. People will have to back into their properties to make it a viable option. And when you intensify to the extent that you are, there's a lot of vehicles that are going to be coming and going on that, and it's going to interfere with the buses, the people, etc. It's not right. Also, the runoff on 205 St. David's Road, which is adjacent to it, is extensive on the laneway, the walkway. It's continual with every heavy rainstorm. It's washing across the street. So this has to be considered in terms of grading to accommodate that by providing a swell on the properties if they are approved. Is there any questions?
Mr. Davidson.
Through you, Mr. Chair, what I would say with regard to the entrance permits, the requirements of the region, it is a regional road. They are requiring the entrance permits. With regard to the city's comments, it might be semantics, but they're suggesting that there are separate entrance permits that are required because there are 2 lots. So that doesn't presuppose where the location of those are going to be situated. In the regional comments, they basically say that it needs to be done taking into consideration the bus bay that is situated there. So it has to be outside of the bus bay. So the region's comments would be the ones that we would be following because it's a regional road. So hopefully that answers.
Well, that answers the question. Then that means that this application should be denied because it asks for a combined entranceway on the properties.
Go ahead, Mr. Davidson.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. The technical locations of the driveways, there was no concern raised, I suppose, by the region. They just say that it needs to be done through the entrance permit process.
It asked for an easement.
Well, it says it may require an easement for a shared entrance. It doesn't say that it will. So again, that's the process that it'll.
I understand that, but I don't understand how you can ask for an easement and it might be approved or not approved. If it's not approved, then the application should be denied.
Yeah, I guess through you, Mr. Chairman, what I would say is that it requires that review to be done, that technical review to be done. Those drawings would be established and created if they aren't able to fulfill that condition and create and establish the right of ways or the accesses, then it would fail. But there has been no concern raised by the region that it isn't a possibility. It just, that needs to be proven by the applicants.
Well, I understand that, but at the same time, there is a possibility that somebody might move the bus stop, in which solves the problem. So that's a choice, and I'm asking who pays for it.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that would be a regional decision.
Mr. DiPaolo, did you have something?
I just through you, Mr. Chair, the purpose of the Committee of Adjustments here today, I think, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, is to decide whether we could actually give consent to create these two lots. Where the parking is then permitted is sounds like a site plan agreement and all that jazz that's going to be done through the planning department and engineering department and that. So what we're here for is deciding whether we should consent to the two additional lots. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So denying the application on parking or on bus shelters is not within our purview. That's going to be more about later on when this actually gets built, if it ever gets built. So our job here today is to decide whether we can provide consent to sever the parcel of land and create two additional lots, correct?
Correct.
So if that being said, and I think you put a motion already on the floor, then I don't know if you have a seconder, but I will second.
Mr. Jackson seconded.
Oh, he did, okay.
Mr. Pizzo. Oh, I think Mr. DiPaolo, are you done? Yes. Yeah, Mr. Pizzo.
Most of these concerns are building permit concerns, are nothing that concerns us. We're just acting on, as Mr. DiPaolo said, on this application. And I think Mr. Kenny had his hand up, so maybe...
You just dozed off there for a second?
But you can't get a permit unless you...
Yeah. No, there's lots of ways for this to fail down the road. Checks and balances, I think, is what it's called usually. Thank you, sir. Further questions or comments from the committee? We have a motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the committee for their work. And Mr. Ravenek, it's good to see you back here. Last time I was in front of the committee, there was a political decision made, and it's nice to see that the committee's been depoliticalized and that members of the public sit on the committee. That's the purpose of the Committee of Adjustment, so that you're not making political decisions when people come before you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank
Through,
you.
through you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, was that a vote on both
That's a vote on-
applications, or was that on 14?
On 14.
Okay, so
We're now, as soon as Mr. Daniels finishes his glad handing, we're going to vote on D15. Same mover and seconder. All in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Next meeting is, do we have a date on the next meeting? Third Thursday, I know, but
September 19th.
19th?
Yes.
Any new business, anyone? Yes, ma'am.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would like to advise the committee of some planning staff updates. Firstly, Tara O'Toole, the former manager of planning, left the city of Thorold's employ back on July 26th. Currently, the manager of planning position is vacant and will be until they find somebody to replace her. Secondly, I would like to introduce our new development planner, Janelle. She just started with us a week and a half ago, so we're just exposing her to committee for possible future projects within this group. So I welcome Janelle with us. This is our committee of adjustment.
Welcome, Janelle. Hope you stay. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going home.
That's a good announcement. So I take that as a motion to adjourn?